Hi. I'm going to talk very briefly about the assignment that you have to do for Friday and indeed every day for the rest of the term, just about. And it's what I'm calling a thesis statement. I want you to write out a thesis statement for the reading that you've done, and I want you to do that before we end up talking about it in class. So the first one you'll do is for Friday, and you're going to have to do two of them. So let me show you what this looks like on Canvas. And I did show you this very briefly in the introduction to the syllabus. Okay, so it looks like this, the syllabus does. And then the thesis statement assignment is up here, and that gives you everything that you're going to need to know. I just gave you a lecture on formalism, I mean a 5-minute lecture on formalism, and that will give you a starting place for a thesis statement. It's going to need to be fleshed out based on what you read in the book. But the examples of formalism in the book are Russian formalism and new criticism. I talked about what they had in common. The example here is if the chapter were devoted just entirely to new criticism, which it's not. So you'll need to do one that incorporates all of formalism. So submit thesis statements, which is a sentence or a few sentences describing the main argument with maybe a couple of the main ideas in as concisely as possible. I don't need long descriptions of the examples. I don't need you to follow the order of the essay. I need you to get right to the point. So if you had to describe the essay in a few words with a couple of key ideas, that's what you're going for. They're graded complete or incomplete. Again, I mentioned this in the syllabus walkthrough, but I'm showing you the marks that I normally give to thesis statements to let you know that if you got a 3 or a 2, that would be complete. If you got a 1 or a 0, that would be incomplete. Again, the examples are assuming, and this is false, that the whole chapter was on the new critics. And what I want you to notice is how detailed the first example is. And the thesis statements don't need to be more than 100 words. This is almost exactly, it's like 98 words. It's well written. It includes a couple of quotations that seem to be necessary in order to explain the theory. So for example, organic unity is really important to the new critics. It's much more detailed than the description I gave in my little mini lecture. And it walks through not the way the Bressler does necessarily, but through the idea really logically and very concisely. Again, it's well written, it's got quotations where it needs quotations, it's primarily in the writer's own words, and it captures the main or maybe 1 or 2 examples. So for example, paradox, irony, or ambiguity, examples of the central tension. The second example here is fine. It gets at the main point, which is that form and content are inseparable, and that the poem has one true meaning, and again, an organic unity. This counts as a complete thesis statement because the writer clearly understands the piece and what's most important about it. The 1 and the 0 don't work. The new critics talk about how it doesn't matter what an author meant. Okay, why does it not matter? What do you mean they talk about it? What do they say? Or what a reader thinks a poem means. Why do they think that doesn't matter? What do they say? The only thing that matters is the poem itself. What part of the poem? How does the poem mean? form and content work together. Okay, that's true, but that's not as strong as being inseparable, which is actually what new critics would say. Readers can do close readings to understand the poem. That's true. New critics talk about how it's important to look at the form of a poem and what the author meant. There's nothing, first of all, that's wrong. And there's nothing in there to give me any clue that the person even listened to my mini lecture, let alone read the chapter. So those are examples. What you're going for is something up here. All right, if you have any questions, I'm just going to remind you for the 4th time that you need to do a thesis statement for Shklovsky, which I'm going to talk about separately. And for this chapter on formalism that incorporates both new critics and Russian formalists, which might be harder or easier than the examples here. Okay. Bye.